Well, folks, the relationship between e-bikes and brick and mortar bike shops might be over. If you can see here, we got a notice of non-renewal of our insurance. And as you see in the red underline, it says no longer meets underwriting guidelines. Of course, this is super vague and we had no idea what this actually meant. So we had to call to our agent, figure it out. And it's because we work on e-bikes. We don't sell e-bikes, but we do fix them. And as I've come to find out over the past couple of days, this hasn't been a single incident. In fact, bike shops all over the country are getting these notices of non-renewal. Basically, the insurance companies don't want to have to cover the responsibility and the risk of these e-bikes. And you might be wondering, why does this even matter? E-bikes aren't dangerous. And for the most part, they aren't. But there has been a large increase in battery fires over the past couple of years. I'm sure you've seen some headlines. They're mainly, I would say, in unregistered batteries might be the best way to put it. It's generally not from a big name brand or anything you're buying online. It's kind of like hacked battery stuff you're finding on Amazon and things like that. But with that said, the actual brands, the e-bike brands, aren't really helping the situation either. Outside of an e-bike from a major manufacturer like Trek, Giant, Specialized, Cannondale, companies like that, any direct-to-consumer bike brand doesn't have the proper certification for the batteries and the electrical systems to really be selling them. And this is kind of an oversight in the US in particular right now, where the regulations really haven't caught up with what's actually happening in reality. So there's a testing requirement where you're supposed to get a UL certification. It's UL 2849, and this is a testing of the entire electrical system. This includes the battery, the electrical components, everything electrical on the bike itself. And there are other UL certifications, but none are quite as comprehensive as the 2849 certification. This is mainly because, again, it tests the entire system as a whole. A lot of batteries will claim they're UL certified, but that just means the battery itself has been checked and certified. And honestly, if you're, believing a Chinese company isn't falsifying documents to make it cheaper to work, I've got all sorts of things to sell you, believe me. So some of the dangers with just a single UL certified battery is that the rest of the electrical system might not be quality components. It might not have the proper wiring gauges to work with the voltage that's coming through them, and this can cause overheating and potentially a fire. And this is becoming all too common. And again, most direct-to-consumer e-bike companies do not have the proper certification. To my knowledge, and I just looked this up, Aventon e-bikes is the only one that has the proper UL 2849 certifications for their entire electrical systems. So you're probably wondering, why aren't these brands certifying their bikes? It'd be a consumer safety problem and concern, right? Well, yes, it is. But of course, like everything in life, it revolves around money. Just doing a little bit of research, it looks like these UL certifications, the proper one, can be upwards of $50,000 per bike model. So you figure a bike company might have, let's just say, 10 different models, and it's $50,000 to certify each one. I'll let you do the math. You're not going to be getting a bike for $1,000 anymore if they're having to put out that kind of money just to get the product to market. It's going to drastically increase the prices for everybody. So if you own an e-bike, what does this mean for you? Well, it probably means there's going to be a lot less places you can take your bike to get worked on, which sucks for the consumer because as of now, there's a lot of bike shops that don't even touch them in the first place. And now the ones that did work on them might not be able to due to insurance reasons. So we're going to do everything we can to continue working on these e-bikes. In fact, we were planning on getting some for our rental fleet this coming summer, which we were kind of counting on as a nice little cash infusion for the year. But we'll have to see what that's going to look like. But as far as working on them, we do have some plans. We're thinking, hey, if you bring in the keys so we can disconnect the battery while we work on the bike, that might be an easy solution. It would kind of suck if the customer couldn't bring the battery into the shop at all, because we do need to kind of test everything just to make sure it's working. And sometimes we do have customers coming in with electrical issues, and we're a shop that can diagnose some of that stuff. We do have the proper equipment. We know how to use a multimeter. We can kind of diagnose electrical issues pretty easily. We do have another 2 or 3 months until the insurance policy ends, so I'm pretty confident we'll figure out something by then, but it's going to be a waiting game for sure. Just some final thoughts for you, especially if you're a potential consumer looking to purchase an e-bike.
I would definitely purchase a bike that has the proper certification. That means you kind of need to get one from one of the major brands or Aventon, or just double check around with the other online brands to make sure they do have the UL 2849 certification. One thing I do know, and we've talked about this with our insurance agent, is even if a company does get the proper certification for newer models, it's not retroactive. So you might end up owning a bike that a bike shop might not be able to even take, even though they do have insurance to work on e-bikes, just because it doesn't have the proper certification. And it does suck just because people are spending thousands of dollars on these bikes to essentially get a potential fire hazard in their home. Not that it's super likely to happen, but there's always the potential for it. And also the fact that, you're spending all this money on something that will eventually need maintenance, and you might not be able to do anything about it. Not everybody is handy, even though some of the stuff is pretty easy to replace. I think most people that are getting e-bikes are generally elderly people. I'm sure you have some people commuting on them, but most people I see, they're over 50 years old. Upwards of 70 sometimes, and this is kind of how they're getting back on a bike later in life, just to get outdoors and get some exercise. And they're spending their hard-earned money, maybe their pension or retirement, on something that's not going to last and it's going to leave them up a creek. And just some final thoughts before I go. This, in reality, is the direct-to-consumer brand's faults. They're the ones that don't want to get the proper certification, and they're basically putting all the risk on the shops and the individuals. I know for a fact there's even apartment complexes that no longer allow e-bikes in their complexes. And it's simply because there's a potential risk and fire hazard, and the companies aren't certifying the batteries, so someone has to take on that risk. And the insurance agents and the companies, they're not going to do it. So they're canceling policies like crazy. Eventually, will end up hurting the brands themselves, but I don't think they're looking that far down the road to even realize that yet. So if you are shopping around, again, I highly, highly recommend going with a reputable brand. Sure, if you're going with one of the big three manufacturers, the Giant, the Trek, you're going to spend a couple $1,000s on an e-bike, but you're also going to get a product that lasts, has good warranties, and it's just going to last a lot longer. That's the other downside about a lot of these online e-bike brands, is they only have a year or maybe a 2-year warranty on them. I don't know about you, but if I spend $2,000 on something, I kind of expect it to last. And just by the warranty language, you can kind of tell this is planned obsolescence. They're not expecting these things to last. They're not going to warranty these things for years. It's just doomed to fail. And it's really sad to see so many people spend their hard-earned money on these without realizing it. So circling back to the point of this video, the insurance, I do believe will be fine in the end. We might have to pay a little bit more for our premiums, but so be it if it means we can work on e-bikes and still help out the community. We are actually the only shop in our city that will work on them in the first place, and we are overrun with them coming in for maintenance. So it would really suck for the general public not to have a resource to go to whenever they have any issues. If you made it this far in the video, I really appreciate you taking the time and just listening to me vent, essentially, because this has been a whirlwind of a few weeks, but I'm confident we'll be coming out on the right side of this eventually. Well, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.